The sun dipped low, casting a molten glow across the Carter Ranch, a sprawling, untamed expanse of 200 acres that had belonged to my family long before the term homeowners association ever polluted the land. To outsiders it was just pasture and timber, but to me it was blood and bone. Lately, however, peace had been in short supply. The HOA, a cluster of power-drunk busybodies from the newly minted Whispering Pines community, had declared my ranch an eyesore. They didn't care that my land wasn't part of their subdivision. They didn't care that my great-grandfather had signed the original township charter. They just wanted me gone. My livestock, my barn, my entire way of life raced for the sake of community aesthetics. The letters started polite and the fines piled up. Then came the threats. Tonight they escalated. I heard them before I saw them. The low mechanical hum of engines climbing my dirt road, steady, deliberate. My dog, Rusty, a wiry Australian cattle dog with more fight than sense, stood rigid by my side, growling low. 3 black SUVs emerged from the tree line, tires crunching the gravel with ominous patience. Their windows were tinted, but I could feel the stares from inside. This wasn't a neighborly visit. This was a message. 6 men stepped out, bulkier than your average HOA clipboard warrior. They wore Whispering Pines polos, but their builds and demeanor screamed hired muscle, ex-military maybe, or worse, private security. They spread out casually, surveying my property like it was already theirs. One of them, a bald man with a silver goatee and permanent sunglasses, took the lead. He smirked as he walked up my porch steps, stopping just short of invading my personal space. "You must be Carter," he said, as if the name was beneath him. "I am," I replied, crossing my arms, making no effort to hide Rusty's growing snarl. "You're trespassing." He pulled out a folded document and waved it between 2 fingers. "Eviction notice, HOA mandate. You've got 72 hours to clear out, or else what?" I asked, already knowing the answer. His grin widened. "Or else we clear you out ourselves." I took the paper, skimmed it briefly, and tore it clean in half. Rusty's tail thumped approvingly. "Cute," the man said, "but you're making this harder than it needs to be." I knew their type. They'd assumed I was just another aging rancher, outnumbered, outgunned, and worn down by bureaucracy. They didn't realize that, while the HOA played with paperwork and posturing, I had spent my life preparing for battles they couldn't fathom. And I wasn't alone. Inside my barn, partially hidden by shadows, was a surprise they would soon regret, waking up but not yet. First, I needed them to feel comfortable, overconfident. That's when men like them made mistakes. Bald Guy nodded to his crew. They spread out, sauntering through my fields like they were inspecting an acquisition. One kicked over a feed bucket. Another yanked a fence post to test its sturdiness. "You know," Bald Guy mused, stepping closer, "it doesn't have to end messy. We're offering you a chance to leave with your dignity. Sell us the land. We'll even throw in a relocation bonus." "Is that what Karen sent you to say?" I asked, watching his reaction. He flinched at the mention of the HOA president, Karen Whitlock, queen of plastic smiles and iron-fisted control. She was the puppet master here, pulling strings from her glass-walled HOA office. But tonight, she'd sent her blunt instrument. "She wants me gone so badly. She sent thugs to do her dirty work," I said. "But you tell Karen this ranch isn't a house on her spreadsheet. It's my home, and I don't scare easy." Bald Guy's smirk thinned. "Suit yourself." The first shove came quick, a deliberate, calculated attempt to provoke. I stumbled back a step, but kept my balance. The second man closed in, expecting me to fold. Instead, I grabbed his wrist, twisted, and brought him to his knees with a sharp, practiced move that got their attention. Rusty lunged, barking furiously, snapping at the ankles of the nearest goon. The calm swagger they carried moments ago cracked into disarray. They hadn't expected resistance. Certainly not here. Not from me. But their night was about to get a whole lot worse. From inside the barn came a mechanical growl, a deep, metallic rumble that made the ground beneath us tremble. The men froze, eyes darting towards the source. "Gentlemen," I said, stepping back towards the barn door, "you picked the wrong ranch." As the ancient wooden doors creaked open, their faces paled. That was the last moment they'd ever underestimate a Carter. The barn doors groaned as they parted, revealing old Betsy in her full, intimidating glory. She wasn't just a machine, she was a declaration. A World War II half-tracked armored vehicle, meticulously restored over the years, with reinforced steel, plating and a makeshift sound system that could rattle windows a mile away. But tonight, her most important feature was a set of high-pressure manure sprayers mounted at the rear end, agricultural necessity. I had no problem repurposing for crowd control, but the goons weren't laughing anymore. Bald Guy took a step back, his bravado flickering. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. I wasn't. I climbed into Betsy's driver's seat, Rusty hopping up beside me with a bark of approval. With a twist of the ignition, Betsy roared to life, her diesel heart thumping like a war drum. Floodlights snapped on, cutting through the twilight and blinding the men who dared to think they could scare me off my own land. "Last chance to leave with your pride intact," I called through the loudspeaker, my voice amplified into a thunderous challenge. But pride's a funny thing, Nit. Makes people stupid, bald guy snarled, waving his crew forward. Take him down. That was their mistake. As they advanced, I flipped the switch on Betsy's control panel. A deafening siren bled, a gut punch of sound that had them stumbling, clutching their ears. Rusty barked in rhythm, adding to the chaos. Two of them bolted towards Betsy's flanks, maybe thinking they could climb aboard and drag me out. But they'd never dealt with a rancher who knew his land. I eased Betsy forward, her treads grinding over the uneven dirt, forcing them into retreat. They weren't trained for this kind of fight. This wasn't a sterile HOA boardroom where they could bark orders and sign fines. This was my battlefield. Let's cool you off, I said, engaging Betsy's rear sprayers. A high-pressure jet of liquefied manure erupted, dousing the nearest goon head. Chito, he slipped, hit the ground hard, and immediately regretted every life choice that had led him here. The others recoiled, but not fast enough. The next sweep caught bald guy square in the chest. His designer polo was instantly reduced to a muddy canvas of humiliation. Fall back, he shouted, voice cracking. But the ranch wasn't done with them yet. As they stumbled toward their SUVs, I maneuvered Betsy into a position that blocked their exit. The message was clear. This land didn't belong to them. It never had. One of the men, younger and clearly regretting his career choice, raised his hands. Look man, we were just following orders. Then take this message back to Karen Whitlock, I said, silencing the sirens so every word hit home. The Carter Ranch doesn't kneel to HOA mandates. You want a war. You just found one. They scrambled into their vehicles, engines revving in panic. Their once menacing black SUVs now looked pitiful, streaked with mud, their intimidation shattered. As they tore down my dirt road, I stood atop Betsy, Rusty at my side, watching them retreat. The fight, however, was far from over. Karen wouldn't accept defeat, not publicly. She was the type who believed money and influence could bend reality. Tonight's failure would only provoke her. She'd escalate, call in favors, maybe even twist the law. But she didn't understand people like me. She didn't understand that legacy isn't for sale. As the dust settled and Betsy rumbled to a stop, I looked over my land. The night was still peaceful, but it was the calm before the storm. I knew Karen Whitlock well enough to know she'd come back with paperwork, with lawmen, with every weapon of bureaucracy she could muster. She wouldn't stop until she either owned this land or ruined herself trying. I gave Rusty a scratch behind the ear. We're not done yet, boy. The battle lines were drawn. She had her HOA board and a file full of fake ordinances. I had old Betsy, Rusty, and a deed that ran deeper than her entire community. And next time, it wouldn't just be hired goons knocking on my gate. The morning after the ambush, the storm arrived not with fists or SUVs but with polished shoes and silver handcuffs. Karen Whitlock stood at my gate, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies. She looked as though she'd just stepped out of a luxury car commercial, immaculate in her tailored navy suit, a smug half-smile plastered beneath her oversized sunglasses. The deputies, however, wore no such confidence. They shuffled uncomfortably, as if they knew they were being used. Mr. Carter, Karen announced, voice syrupy sweet but laced with venom. I'm here to formally press charges for assault, public endangerment, and environmental violations. You've left me no choice. I didn't flinch. You always had a choice, Karen. You just thought I wouldn't fight back. One of the deputies cleared his throat, glancing at me with an apologetic tilt of the head. They didn't want this, but they had paperwork. Orders. Karen waved a folder in the air. It's over, Mr. Carter. The county code is very clear. Your property is now in violation of HOA regulations. You'll be escorted off the premises until further notice. That was her plan. Bureaucracy. She didn't know I'd been planning for this moment since the first fine landed in my mailbox. You're right, I said calmly, pulling my phone from my pocket. The county code is very clear. So is the land charter your HOA never bothered to read. I tapped a button, and on cue, my attorney's voice crackled through the speaker. Martha Hill here, Mr. Carter. You're on with the County Land Registry. Environmental Compliance Board and Channel 7 News is listening in. To Karen's smirk faded. I held up a weathered, embossed document for all to see. This is the original township deed from 1893. My family's land encompasses not only this ranch but extends to the very soil your HOA clubhouse sits on. The deputies stiffened. They'd heard rumors, but seeing the deed was something else. Karen, however, wasn't done bluffing. That's nonsense, she spat. Our development was legally approved. Approved, yes, but the land lease was never finalized. Technically, every home past the North Ridge is built on Carter land under a 99-year agricultural lease, which, I've decided, I won't be renewing. The color drained from her face. For the first time, the indomitable HOA president realized her house of cards was built on someone else's foundation. You're lying, Martha's voice cut in. Karen Whitlock, this is a formal notice of injunction against the Whispering Pines HOA for illegal encroachment and unauthorized land development. Effective immediately, all HOA activities are suspended pending investigation. Karen's jaw clenched so hard I could hear her molars grind. She turned to the deputies. arrest him, but they didn't move. Instead, Deputy Harris, a local who'd known my family for years, stepped forward. "Ma'am, unless you can provide documentation overriding a land deed, we're not making any arrests today." Karen's composure cracked. Her lips quivered as she fumbled for words that wouldn't come. Her legal offensive had been neutralized in broad daylight, and worse, she was losing face in front of her enforcers. But I wasn't done. "I've also filed a public notice," I added, scrolling through my phone. "Every resident of Whispering Pines is now aware that their HOA clubhouse, pool, and office are sitting on land they don't own. They're going to want answers, Karen." The truth was now viral. Local news outlets had picked up the story. Within minutes, "HOA tyrant tries to steal ranch, gets outmaneuvered by landowner" was the headline plastered across every feed in the county. Karen turned on her heel, her exit more of a retreat than a departure. She barked into her phone, frantic, but the damage was done. The illusion of her authority had been shattered. The deputies gave me a nod, part apology, part respect, before following her down the gravel path as I stood there watching her luxury SUV kick up dust in a furious escape. I knew this was only round two. Karen wasn't the type to surrender gracefully. She'd be back, angrier, sloppier, and more desperate, but she'd made a critical mistake. She'd started a war on my land, with my rules, and the final battle was coming. It happened 3 nights later. I had expected Karen to retreat, lick her wounds, maybe regroup with a battalion of lawyers, but Karen Whitlock wasn't wired for patience. She was wired for control. That's why, at exactly midnight, a convoy of construction vehicles rumbled up my dirt road, their floodlights slicing through the darkness like searchlights on a battlefield. This wasn't an HOA compliance visit. This was an illegal demolition. At the head of the procession was Karen's silver Mercedes, polished to a mirror sheen even in the dead of night. She stepped out in stilettos, clipboard in hand, flanked by a private security detail dressed in tactical gear. "Mr. Carter," she called out, her voice amplified by a portable megaphone, "this is your final warning. Vacate the premises, or we will be forced to remove unauthorized structures." I stood by the barn, arms crossed, Rusty by my side, his growl low and steady, but I wasn't worried. Not tonight, because Karen wasn't the only one who'd made a few calls. As the construction crew moved forward, engines grumbling, the distant hum of approaching vehicles echoed from the ridge. Headlights appeared, dozens of them, pickup trucks, ATVs, even horseback riders, my neighbors, fellow ranchers, veterans, families whose land had also been threatened by HOA overreach. They weren't here for a brawl. They were here as witnesses. Karen's security team turned uneasy as the crowd formed a semicircle around the site. The balance of power was shifting, and Karen knew it. "Disperse immediately," she snapped, waving her clipboard like a sword. "This is private HOA business." One of the farmers, old man Dalton, stepped forward, grinning beneath his worn Stetson. "Funny thing, Karen. Last we checked, this land ain't HOA property. Looks like you're trespassing." The construction crew hesitated, their operators exchanging nervous glances. They weren't paid enough for this kind of standoff. And then came the sirens. 2 sheriff's cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. But this wasn't a repeat of Karen's staged law enforcement cameo. This time the law was on my side. Deputy Harris emerged first, followed by Captain Monroe, a no-nonsense woman with decades in the force. Both held freshly signed court orders. "Karen Whitlock," Monroe announced, "you are hereby served with a cease and desist for unauthorized demolition activities and trespassing on private land. Additionally, an injunction has been filed against the Whispering Pines HOA for fraudulent land claims." Karen's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she stammered, grasping for control. "This was approved. We have what you have," Monroe cut in, "is a serious problem, starting with the fact that half your HOA amenities sit on Carter-owned land, effective immediately. All HOA operations on this property are suspended." Karen's clipboard slipped from her hand, landing in the dirt. I took a slow step forward. "You thought you could bury me under paperwork and bulldozers, but you forgot, Karen. This land remembers who it belongs to." The construction crew didn't wait for further instructions. They powered down their machines and backed away, eager to escape the fallout. Karen stood alone now, the queen without her court, her empire of HOA regulations crumbling under the weight of her own arrogance. But I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for closure. "You wanted me out of sight, Karen," I said, voice steady. "Instead, you brought the whole county to my doorstep. And they've seen exactly who you are." The crowd erupted into murmurs, phones raised, capturing every second. This wasn't just a local dispute anymore. It was a public spectacle. Karen spun on her heel, storming back to her Mercedes, but even her retreat was pathetic. The once an HOA president, now a symbol of bureaucratic greed undone by her own hubris. As her taillights vanished down the road, Deputy Harris approached me, offering a handshake. "You stood your ground, Carter. Folks around here won't forget that." Rusty barked in agreement. The community dispersed, but the message lingered. The HOA's reign had ended not with a court victory, but with the community standing together. I stood alone beneath the starlit sky, the ranch quiet once more. The battle was over, but my land stood taller than ever. Karen had wanted to haunt me off this ranch. Instead, she'd haunted herself out of power forever.